The day of her funeral was a gray and somber one, much like the entire world had taken on the hue of my grief. The sky was heavy with thick, rain-laden clouds, and the air hung still and cold. I stood before the open casket, my heart heavy with sorrow, as I said my final goodbye to the love of my life, Sarah. Sarah had been the light of my world, her laughter like music, her smile like sunshine breaking through the darkest of storms. She had always been a vibrant and vivacious soul, the kind of person who could light up a room with her presence. But when the illness had taken hold, it had robbed her of that light, leaving her a mere shadow of the woman I had loved. As I stood there, my eyes fixed on her still form, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unreality. It was as if I were in a dream, a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. How could someone so full of life be reduced to this? A lifeless body in a casket. The ceremony was a blur of tears and condolences. The words of the priest, a distant murmur. I clung to Sarah's memory, my mind a whirlwind of grief and disbelief. How could she be gone? How could I go on without her? After the service, I found myself alone in the funeral home, the mourners having departed to their own lives and responsibilities. I stood by Sarah's casket, my hand resting on the polished wood. The sound of the rain tapping against the windows seemed to echo my heartache. "I love you," I whispered to her lifeless form, my voice choked with emotion. "I will always love you." As I turned to leave, a strange sensation washed over me, a feeling of being watched. I turned back to the casket, my eyes widening in shock. Sarah's eyes were open. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at her. It was impossible, unthinkable. She had been pronounced dead, her body prepared for burial. But there she was, her eyes fixed on me, a flicker of recognition in her gaze. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice trembling, "is that you?" She didn't respond, her eyes locked onto mine. I reached out, my trembling fingers brushing against her cheek. Her skin was cold to the touch, her body rigid and unmoving, but her eyes, the windows to her soul, seemed to hold a spark of life. Panic set in as I realized that something was terribly wrong. I stumbled out of the funeral home, my mind racing, my heart heavy with dread. I couldn't explain what I had just witnessed, but I knew it was a sign that things were not as they seemed. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Sarah's open eyes haunted my thoughts, a chilling reminder of the impossibility of her situation. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something, that there was more to her death than met the eye. In the early hours of the morning, I decided to return to the funeral home, determined to uncover the truth. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside damp and glistening in the pale light of dawn. The funeral home was quiet, the mourners long gone, and I was the only one there. I approached the casket with trepidation, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached out and gently touched Sarah's cheek, praying for a sign, a glimmer of hope. But there was nothing. Her skin was cold and lifeless, her eyes still and unseeing. I sank to my knees, tears streaming down my face. It had all been a cruel trick of the mind, a product of my grief-stricken imagination. Sarah was gone, and there was nothing I could do to change that. But as I sat there, a glint of metal caught my eye, a small, silver locket that hung around Sarah's neck. It was delicate and ornate, the kind of keepsake that held sentimental value. I reached out and opened it, revealing a tiny photograph of the two of us smiling and happy in happier times. And then, with a shock that nearly knocked the breath from my lungs, I saw it. The faintest flicker of movement in the reflection of the locket. I peered closer, my heart racing, and that's when I saw her. Sarah, alive and well, standing behind me in the reflection. I whirled around, my eyes wide with disbelief, but there was no one there. I turned back to the locket, my hands trembling as I watched her image. She was there, her eyes filled with sadness, her lips moving as if she were trying to speak. I knew then that I had to find out what had happened, to uncover the truth behind Sarah's death, or what I had believed to be her death. The locket was the key, a clue that she was still somehow connected to this world. Over the course of days and weeks, I delved into the mystery surrounding Sarah's illness and death. I discovered that she had been misdiagnosed, that her condition had been treatable all along. But by the time the mistake had been discovered, it was too late. I couldn't help but wonder if Sarah's spirit had somehow clung to this world, if her love for me had been strong enough to defy death itself. The locket had become a conduit, a link between our two worlds, allowing her to communicate with me. As I stood by her grave one last time, I knew that I had to let her go, to allow her to find peace in the afterlife. I removed the locket from her casket and held it close to my heart. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I will always cherish the time we had together." And with that, I closed the locket, severing the connection between our worlds. Sarah's image faded from the reflection, leaving behind only the memory of her smile and the love that had once filled our hearts. As I walked away from the cemetery, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure, a bittersweet peace that settled over me. Sarah was gone, but her love would live on in my heart, a testament to the enduring power of love beyond the grave. Don't forget to subscribe and share.